All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Torah Studies. So this is our weekly look at the Torah portion, which is Vayikra. It's the beginning of the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. And, my friends, the book of Vayikra, Leviticus. Why Leviticus? What does Leviticus mean? Leviticus is related to the word Levi or Levi, right? It's the book of Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi, which includes Kohanim and Leviim, priests and Levites, because this book primarily speaks about the temple and its service. In fact, the opening portion of Vayikra speaks primarily of karbanos, sacrifices and offerings that were brought in the Mishkan. Later on, it would be brought in the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. So what's important to know right out the gate is that there are a number of sacrifices brought. Let's actually go around based on what you remember, based on what you recall. What were some of the sacrifices in the temple offered for? What would be a reason to bring an offering?
Peace offering.
Sin offering, peace offering, excellent. Thanksgiving offering, beautiful. Wow, like we're almost there. What else?
Sin offering.
Sin offering, good. We have sin offering, we have Thanksgiving offering, we have peace offering. Okay, holiday, there were holiday offerings. There were guilt offerings. There's a difference between a sin offering and a guilt offering. It's very interesting. Sin offering is typically if you did something, you committed a sin, but it was inadvertent. Like, classic example is you forgot at Shabbos. So like, oh my gosh, like, you're into the day and you're like, or in the morning, you're doing your morning ritual, like, it's Shabbos. What am I doing? It's not Tuesday. I'm hitting light, doing all these things. So that would be a sin offering. It means you committed a sin. It's not about the guilt. It's about the sin. A guilt offering is if you did something, intentional, if you did something that was a little bit more devious. Make sense? You have the sin offering, the guilt offering. Today we're going to talk about a guilt offering, actually, and relate it to guilt. You have the peace offering. Okay, yeah, I mean, those are kind of some of the classic categories. Now, toward the end of the Torah portion, speaking of guilt offerings, we read about a specific type of guilt offering. This is a guilt offering. Here's the scenario. Let's say, for example, someone lends someone else money, and they have an agreement. Now, maybe there's no contract. Maybe it's a verbal agreement. That way, things can get a little bit sticky. The guy comes back to collect the money, and the borrower says, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, wait, I gave you $100 last week. You said, come back to me on Tuesday, April 1st. Guy's like, April Fools. No, I'm kidding. He says, never happened. I don't know I never took money from you. The guy's like, are you serious? He's like, are you serious? There's no proof. There's no contract. There's no witnesses. There's no videotape. There's no secret audio recordings. Garnished. So what happens? Typically in cases like these, the defendant has to take an oath. What's the oath? The oath is that, again, the details of the case, when do you take an oath? We're going to leave out all of the granular details. The point is what we're about to get to. Then, so the fellow denies, the borrower, he did borrow the money. He denies having borrowed the money. He then takes an oath and swears, I did not borrow money. And then at a later point in time, what does he feel? Guilty. Hence the name guilt offering. He feels guilty. And so what does he do? He comes forward and says, all right, I admit, I cop to it. I did borrow the money the whole time. The guy's like, I know you borrowed, obviously, but they couldn't do anything and so he admits to it. Question now is, what is he on the hook for? So the Torah, we're going to read this inside, but so I just want to say it outside. We have it clear, and then we'll read the verses. The Torah says, here is what he's on the hook for. When he finally steps forward and admits his guilt, well, he admits two things. He admits that he really did, in fact, borrow the money. And he also admits that he lied when he took an oath. You with me on that?
What if he had dementia? He really did think he did.
No, well, that's a medical thing. So if he really didn't know, then then you don't bring a guilt offering. This is someone who knew what they were doing, and hence the guilt. So what's the penalty, or what's the next step? So he has to return the amount of money that he borrowed. So in this case, I gave you $100 scenario. He has to give back the $100. He then, as we'll see, he has to give an additional fifth payment. Okay, and today's class is all about the extra fifth. And then he has to bring an offering. That's why it's in this section dealing with offerings. A karban asham, a guilt offering for having denied and sworn falsely about taking a loan.
Well, why isn't that a sin offering? If he knew he was
good.
lying.
So that's what I said before. Sin offering, chatas, karban chatas, is only when you do it inadvertently, by mistake. When you do it and you do it, right. No, I'm saying in English, I think we would say sin is more devious than guilt. But no, sin means the sin was done. Guilt means you are guilty of doing it. I mean, you manifested that intentionally, etc. Okay, so that's the difference. So that's a rule of thumb. A sin offering. I mean, I think in like popular lexicon, sin offering if you did something wrong. No, sin offering if you did something wrong by mistake. A guilt offering if it was a little bit more intentional devious.
Might sound weird, but given that, because like you said, I think that I did before. I think that sin was worse than guilt. But given that sin is a lighter offense than guilt, is there a difference in the value or what had to be sacrificed?
Excellent. Good question. So Ramon is asking, what about the actual offering that was brought? Is that reflected? Is the more serious offense reflected in maybe a more expensive offering? To answer that, we would have to look at all the verses. So that's our homework after the class. We'll look back at the various offerings. Look, there were, sin offerings and guilt offerings where if you could afford it, you had to bring this. If you couldn't afford it, it was a bit of a sliding scale, and you could bring like either an animal, maybe a bird, or maybe only, some flower offering. Anyway, we have to look back at all the, because there's a bunch of different types and nuances to see exactly about the value. However, let's begin with the text that I kind of paraphrased it outside, but let's read this inside. David, please kick it off with text number 1, but hold on. Before you get started, let me make sure that, here we go, I got it right here. We're going to make sure to share with everybody online because, as we know by now, sharing is caring. Okay, text number 1, Leviticus 5, verse 20.
And God spoke to Moses, saying, if a person sins, betraying God by falsely denying to his fellow concerning a deposit or money given in hand, or an object taken by robbery, or he withheld funds from his fellow, or he found a lost article and he denied it and swore falsely regarding any one of all these cases whereby a man may sin, and it shall be when he has sinned and is guilty that he shall return the article that he has robbed, or the funds that he had withheld, or the item that he had been deposited with him, or the article that he had found, or anything else regarding which he had sworn falsely, he shall pay it with its principal, adding its fifth to it. He shall give it to its rightful owner on the day he repents for his guilt. He shall then bring his guilt offering to God, an unblemished ram from the flock, with the same value for a guilt offering to the Kohen. And the Kohen shall make atonement for him before God, and he shall be forgiven for any one of all cases whereby one may commit a sin, incurring guilt through it.
So what's interesting is that word sin and guilt. You see it used, both terms are used. Chatas and asham. What's the difference? I think based on my introduction, hopefully it's a little bit clear. The sin is the original kind of, the theft, is borrowing the money, not repaying it, or finding something and not disclosing it, etc. Or somebody deposits with you. Someone says, "Hey, can you watch my item while I go out of town?" And then they come back like, "You never gave it to me." Like all of these cases, that's a sin. The guilt is now when you swore falsely about it. Now you double down on the offense. And so now you're really guilty. Okay.
So is the 20%?
Rabbi Ari.
Hold on 1 second, Jay. Yeah.
It's the 20% regardless of how long you've had it.
What a good question.
So if it's 3 days, you're paying 20%, and if it's 2 years, you're paying the same 20%.
Excellent question. Let me repeat the question. Is the 20%? There's a name for this in interest. What's it called?
Usury.
No.
Revit.
Well, it is interest. No. But I'm saying there's a way that it's like calculated by day. Or just
per diem,
or is it just like off the top? I don't believe it's not per diem. It is just 20%, no matter how long it is being held. Jay, jump it. Yeah.
So once you realize you've made that mistake, you should really just hold on to it longer to reduce the effective interest
But
rate.
it's not a mistake. It was a, once you feel guilty for what you've done and you want to make amends, exactly. Then maybe you're like, well, how about tomorrow? Jay.
What about the law against charging interest for beat
Oh,
to a Jew? This is
Sure.
actually usury. I mean, this is like in Brooklyn, they would do this.
well, so you're asking a good question. It seems like biblically mandated or sanctioned interest, where you're giving back the principal plus an extra fifth. Since when? Hold that question, and also related to what you said. Also, it's all going to be related. We're going to take a massively deep dive today in this fifth. So, and I think we're going to hopefully we'll address this satisfactorily. But so hold that thought, hold that question. Now, I do want to mention something else, technical detail. How is the fifth calculated? Now I know what you're thinking. How complicated is it to calculate a fifth? Okay. If I told you a fifth of $100, what would that number be?
20.
20. So you would think that the guy pays back 100 plus 20, which is 120. However, as the Talmud clarifies, the fifth is not a fifth of the 100. It's a fifth, including the penalty. The penalty will be a fifth of the total, which essentially means it's a quarter. Basically, he gives him 125, not 120. Because when you give 125, then the total number, which is 125, 25 is a quarter of is a fifth. Yes?
Right.
25 is a fifth of 125, correct? That's how it works. So essentially it works like this. You don't take the principal and divide it into 4. You take the principal plus the fine. You have to figure out how that works. You have to get a fifth where the total will be, the fine will have been a fifth of the total. Either way, let's stick with my example, 100, you don't give 120, you give 125. So you're really paying a quarter of the amount, so that the total will be 1/5. Okay. Now, so it'll be a fifth of the full total. Okay. We're going to focus on one phrase and Rashi on that phrase and ask a few questions and hopefully come away with some absolutely just mind-blowing ideas. The verse I want to call your attention to is one we already read, verse number 24. I'll put it back up over here. Verse 24 is very important. If you look, it's on top of page marked 177, and it says, it kind of picks up mid-sentence or anything else, whatever, it denies anything else, whatever, regarding which he has sworn falsely. So it's not just that he denied the money, it's that he then doubled down on that denial by swearing falsely. That's where the guilt comes in. So then the Torah says, as we know, he shall pay it with its principal, adding its fifths to it. Okay, all of that is good. The second half of verse 24 is where we want to dig in. He shall give it to its rightful owner on the day he repents for his guilt. He shall give it to its rightful owner. What does that mean? He should give the money to its rightful owner. Okay, got it. So that means the guy that he stole from or denied or took the loan, whatever it is. Okay. Let's take a look at Rashi, because Rashi is going to be a little bit perplexing. Rashi, Sindri. Text 2, please.
To its rightful owner, to the rightful owner of the money.
The obvious question on Rashi is, which we love to ask, what is Rashi adding? If you look at Rashi, Rashi does not seem to be adding much. The Torah says you give the money to its rightful owner. That's a direct quote. And Rashi says, what does it mean to its rightful owner? The rightful owner of the money. Who else were we thinking about? Like, who else?
Hashem owns the money.
Okay. Maybe you're saying to the boss, the one to whom all belongs. It says, Rashi says, well, the problem with that is Rashi doesn't clarify, because Rashi says to the rightful owner of the money, that also might be God. That also might be Hashem. In other words, it doesn't seem like Rashi is helping us much with this information.
What if it wasn't money that he took possession of? What if it was a goat?
Yeah, but it means the value, the monetary value of it. It seems a little bit of honestly, it seems like to me, I know I'm literally asking it, but it's not only my question. Obviously, we're getting it from, the commentaries and the Rebbe's insights on it. So the question seems pretty ironclad. The Torah says, "La'asher hulo," return it to the one to whom it belongs, and Rashi's "Lami shamamashlo," to one to whom the money belongs. Is he adding the word? Is the money the focus? What's Rashi clarifying? Now, that's
Could he be clarifying that you don't go through the Beit Din, you go directly to the owner?
Very good. Now, hold that thought, David. What we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at the Gemara, because the Talmud actually says exactly what David says, which is that when it comes to returning theft, or in this case, it's both the principal plus the fine. So it has to go directly to the aggrieved party and not through any other intermediaries. This is a Talmudic teaching. The problem is, Rashi doesn't say this. In other words, Rashi just says, to the one to whom the money belongs. Yeah. Does he mean this? That only directly? Then he could have added an extra word or two to clarify this. Let's see the Talmudic passage. Okay, let's see it inside, and then this is gonna actually lead to an expansion of our question. Text 3a. Ramon, please read this one. Begins on top of 178, where it says Mishnah.
One who robs another of an item will work at least one peruta and takes a false oath to the robbery victim, claiming their innocence, and then later wishes to repent, must bring the money to the victim, even if this necessitates chasing them as far as Media. The robber may not give the payment to the victim's child or agent, but may give the payment to an agent of the court. If the robbery victim has died, the money is returned to their heirs. Gemara, what is the reason? The verse states, he shall give it to his rightful owner on the day he repents for his guilt.
Thank you. Now that last line, which the Gemara, the Talmud, uses as the proof text for this idea, is the verse that we're dealing with, right? Where it says he shall give it to its rightful owner on the day he repents for his guilt. So it has to go straight back to the rightful owner. So it cannot go to the child. It doesn't go to an agent. Now, it can go to an agent of the court, but that's really because the court's going to give it directly to, it's a little bit more direct, whatever. We can get into that. We would have to look up
Could it really be getting to the fact that the rightful owner may end up being an heir because the original person is deceased?
Right. That could be a thing. However, and so if Rashi were to explain, the meaning of this verse, or this phrase, give it to its rightful owner, he should have said, not to the son, not to an agent. If he dies, you give it to the heir. He could have said some of this without, Rashi keeps it short, but he could have said some of this. What Rashi does say is very vague. Rashi just says, to the rightful owner of the money. Now, you could say that, well, maybe in those short words, that's exactly what he's saying, directly to the owner, not to an agent, not to the son, not to this, not to that. You could say that, but it seems a little bit of a stretch to say that that's what Rashi meant when he really was vague about it. It seems like he's not saying this. If he wanted to say this, he would have used at least a little bit of he would have made a bit of a nod to the Talmudic terminology that we just read in 3a. He just seems to be reiterating what the verse says and not really explaining much else. And that's really the core question. So really the question is, so really the question is twofold. It's really two sides of the same coin. It's not like two different questions. Question is number one, like part A, side, it's like a record. Side A or a cassette. Side A of the question is, what's Rashi saying? Like, what's he adding? And side B of the question is, if Rashi really wanted to add some value ideas, he should have just said something like the Talmud says, not to the agent, not to the child, directly. If they died, it goes to the son. All right, could have, because if the person passed away, then going to the heir would be the one to whom the money belongs. Like that would also work. Again, you could say that that's exactly what Rashi meant, and he's just giving us, it's written so briefly that it encapsulates all of this Talmudic passage. I don't know. It seems a little strange. It seems like he's trying to say something else, and we're going to take the angle the approach that he is saying something a little bit different. Let's take a look, just to finish this off, let's take a look at text 3b. Ramon, if you don't mind, please read 3b. 3b is from the Malbim.
To his rightful owner. The verse spells out that the restitution must be made to the owner of the stolen item, meaning that it must be given to the owner directly, not through an agent.
Okay, now, I mean, if Rashi were writing his commentary, isn't that a little bit more clear if that's what Rashi was really saying? That the restitution must be made to the owner of the stolen items and not through an agent. He could have said something like that.
Well, Rashi is known for succinctness.
Right. So that's right. You could always say that Rashi, is so succinct that he's in 3 words he's including it. But today we're going to go with a bit of a different angle, that he's really alluding to something that is even more mind-blowing than just what the Talmud says. Okay. So now with this in mind, so we have like a few questions. Basically, what's Rashi really saying? Let's actually analyze what the Torah is saying. Because let's stop for a moment and ask the core question. The Torah is telling us about a situation where some guy is essentially ripping off someone else. And it could be in a number of different circumstances. Either he borrowed money and then lied about it. Either he was given something to watch and he lied about it. Either he found something that belongs to someone else and he lied about it. All of these different cases, right? Basically, it's someone has something that belongs to someone else and is saying, I don't know what you're talking about. And in all of these cases, the guy then literally swears falsely. And by the way, a shvuah, an oath, in Torah, in Jewish law, is very severe. It means you go over to a Sefer Torah, to a Torah scroll, you take an oath, like using God's name. It's like really severe. The guy doubled down by taking a false oath. Later on, he feels guilty, and he says, you know what? I got to confess. I did it. I'm the guy. All right, here, take it. And then the Torah says, so he has to pay the principal plus the fifth to the one to whom it belongs. Why does the Torah need to tell us that? Forget Rashi. Forget the fact that Rashi seems to not be adding much within his wording. What is the Torah saying? What would you have thought? That he's going to give the money to what? A stranger? Who? Like, it should say he should return or give back the money plus a fifth and bring an offering. Why does it add the words la'asher hu lo, to the one to whom it belongs, to the rightful owner? Of course, you're going to give it to the rightful owner. Oh, good. So now we're going to get into, and this is going to be the bulk of today's conversation, is that in this situation, there are 2 financial payments. One is the principal, and the other one is the fifth on top of that, or whatever, however that's calculated, as I said before, the extra money. And one might have said that maybe the principal should go back to, obviously, to the one who belongs. But maybe the extra fifth should go elsewhere. Now, why would we have thought that? Hold on, we're going to get into this. We're going to break this down. But this is what we might have thought, which is why the Torah says that both the principal and the fifth go la'asher lo, go to the rightful owner, meaning don't divide those monies into 2 different deposit locations. They both go to the same guy. This is clarified by Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg in Hakdav HaKabbalah in text number 4. Toba, we are up to you. Please give it a read, text 4.
To its rightful owner, to the rightful owner of the money, Rashi, the verses state that the thief must return and pay. Who then should the restitution be made to, if not to the victim? Why does the verse need to specify to its rightful owner? I may have thought the principal should be paid to the original owner, but the added fifth should be donated to divine services, like the sacrifice. The verse therefore states to its rightful owner that the added fifth must be paid to the same person who receives the principal.
Oh, now we're getting some. Now, and again, I said this outside, but here we have a little bit more clarification. Remember, this is not the conclusion. This is what I might have thought had the Torah not added those words. I might have thought the following. The money of the principal obviously needs to make the fellow who lost, who took a loss, it's got to make him whole again. What about the extra fifth? I might have said the following. The extra fifth is like the offering, the carbon. Remember we said that this guy has to 3 things: return the money or the value, the extra fifth, and bring an offering, bring an animal offering. Well, who does the animal offering go to? Also that guy? No. Animal offering is a guilt offering to God. You might have thought that the fifth is also an offering to God, and it should go to the temple, it should go to the Kohen, it should go to something sacred, like a sacred donation, as opposed to a recompense to the victim. Comes along the Torah and says, no, 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 no. Even the fifth has to go back to the original owner. But now we ask the question, so why would we have thought to split the money? Let me explain the rationale behind the thought to split the money. So here we go. In halakha, in Jewish law, and this is a very important general halakhic information. There's two types of monetary penalties or payments. One is called mammon, which literally means money, and the other one is called knas. Knas. What does knas mean? Kuf, nun, samach.
Oh, fine.
Fine. Excellent. You have, I'm going to do the little translation that I'll explain. Money and fine. What's the difference? Money means principal. The fine is the icing on top, the extra. What's the difference between the two? Okay. So when it comes to these types of financial litigation, so the principle would be that which was taken from, the victim and needs to be paid back. So, for example, if somebody borrowed $100 and then lied about it and swore falsely about it, right? So whenever they come clean, they have to give back the $100. That's not a fine. We wouldn't say that is a court-imposed fine. You're not being fined $100. You got to return the $100 because you stole $100. That's not a fine. What's a fine? Fine means you've been a bad boy, right? It's a penalty. You've done something wrong. Oh, I like the word penalty, right? So sometimes you have a thing where there's the money that's owed, and then on top of that, because of X, Y, or Z, we're going to pose a penalty on top of that. It's not the money that's owed. It's a penalty on top of the money that's owed. I know I'm like saying literally what it is, but there's a difference between the two. So vis-a-vis, this relationship with the victim, you have the person that stole the money or lied about it, swore falsely about it, and then you have the victim whose money was stolen. So the money that goes, the original money, the $100, that's not a fine. It's not a knas. Money. The knas, the extra $25 that we said, with the calculation, that's not the money. That's a fine. Now, here's how this works. In general, I'm going to give you the rule and then the exception, which is actually our case. The rule is that somebody is typically fined only if they got busted. Let me explain. In a typical case, somebody steals, and we don't know who the thief is. And then the thief comes forward at some point later and says, you know what? I got to come clean. It was me. Didn't lie about it. Didn't swear falsely about it. Just stole it, laid low, and then came out and said, I did it. Halacha says, Jewish law says, what's the penalty? Or what's the verdict? Return what was stolen. That's it. There's no fine on top of that. When do we typically impose a fine? Only if you got busted. Only if we had to, crack the case. If witnesses come forward and they say, oh, we know who did it. We saw who stole. It was so-and-so who stole. And then they go and they find the stuff and they make a raid and they bust the thief. They drag him to court. Now you got the penalty. Typically penalty for theft in that case is twice the amount. So the 100, let's say it's $100 value plus another 100. Typically we only impose a fine if you got busted. If you come clean, it's almost like an incentive to come in clean. So if you come clean, no penalty. Like the government does it sometimes, like if you have an illegal firearm, you can return it, no question. We're not gonna impose any penalties on you, right? Maybe late taxes, no penalties on you. Do they do that? No, they don't. Okay. Well, it would have been nice, right?
No, it's true. The government sometimes does say that. The IRS.
Maybe. Who knows? All right.
I've heard about it. Not me, but
yeah, I'm with you. So you have this thing. Where if you come clean, no penalty. If you're not, penalty. Okay. So the question is, in our case, did he come clean or did he not come clean? What do you think?
He came clean.
He can't, yeah, but
only after he swore otherwise.
yeah. So now he kind of came clean. He kind of did. Now he didn't get busted by witnesses. It's not like it was an external thing. It was still internal. But you can't say that he committed the crime, felt guilty about it, and then fessed up. He committed the crime, did not feel guilty, doubled down his denial, swore falsely, about that, about him not doing it, and then he felt guilty about the false swear or whatever he felt guilty about, then came clean. So in this case, we're inclined to give him a fine. Now it's not the double, but it's a fifth. So now the question becomes, who gets the money? Who gets the money? Let's think about it this way. Who should get the original 100? It's not a question. The victim. That's not a question. But the question is in cases like these, where, like in the case, a typical case where somebody steals and then busted by the court. The court has witnesses, there's a raid, there's a sting, they find him, they catch him with the stolen goods, and they bring him to court. He has to pay double. In that case, who does the double go to? It goes to the victim also. Why? The principal goes to the victim, but he got busted. So who's getting paid? Fine. But in this case, it's like a hybrid. On the one hand, he's not coming from a place of pure innocence, so we give him a fine. On the other hand, he did come from his own conscience.
Consciousness.
No, well, conscience, right? Conscience. He came right. He felt guilty. So then maybe it should be part of his offering to God. Maybe it should be part of his atonement. Maybe he should give the fifth to the Kohen. That's why the Torah has to tell us, no, even the extra fifth, that's what the Torah explains. No, you should know the extra fifth still has to go to the victim. Take a look now. I just covered about 4 or 5 texts. I want to read this inside because it's important. I think it's a great opportunity to learn some of these halachas and these halachic terminology, which I hopefully have explained in a way that makes sense. Now, let me share the screen. I think we're up to me, I want to say. I'm going to read text 5, okay? This comes from Rambam, Mishnah Torah. So this is Maimonides, and here we go. This is the operating principle. Whenever a person pays for damage that they caused, it is considered a monetary obligation. Whenever a person is obligated to pay more or less than the damage caused, as in the case of the obligation to pay double the value for theft, or the obligation to pay half of the value for certain forms of damage caused by one's animal, that amount that is greater or less than the principal is considered to be a fine. So again, I'm pausing here for a moment after the first paragraph. So we have mamain and knas. The way it's translated here is principal, or sorry, maybe the damage or the principal, and then the fine, which is the knas on top of that. A fine is required only when one's obligation to pay is established through the testimony of witnesses. Right? Remember, as I explained, if a person voluntarily comes forward about a theft they committed, they only have to provide restitution of the amount. There's nothing above and beyond that. But if it's established, if the guilt is established or obligation through the testimony of witnesses, then you have to pay a fine. Let's continue. Back inside, when a person's obligation is based on their own admission, they are absolved of the obligation to pay a fine. One could argue it's because it's trying to incentivize the return. You know how many pieces of art have been stolen over the years that are currently like gone from museums? And this is kind of the way, imagine the Torah said, imagine the law said, when you come forward, double. It's never gonna happen. I stole a $10 million painting and I gotta give back the painting and another 10 million. I'm gonna burn the thing if I have nowhere else to put it. I'm not gonna return it. I gotta be crazy to do that. Torah says, look, no fine, just give it back. If it's money. If it's a thing, give back the thing, whatever it is, just give it back. No penalty. If you get busted, if there's a bust, yeah, we're going to throw the book at you. Okay, that's what Maimonides says. Let's continue 6a. Orim Gedolim. So here this breaks down further these two categories of mammon and knas. Okay, this is halachic. Look, it's coming up in this context tonight. I think it's general knowledge that's very good to know. Let's read it inside. Text 6a. I'll read. There are two general categories of monetary obligatory. I don't think that's a correct grammar. A, payments, and B, fines. Again, mammon and knas in the Hebrew. As is known, there are a number of legal implications from this distinction. We can explain these different laws by defining the respective purposes of these forms of payment. So now we're going to get into the psychology of what defines a payment and what defines a fine. Or principal versus the on top of the principal fine. The goal of any payment is receipt. Since it doesn't mean that you get a paper, it means that the recipient receives it. Since the offender owes the victim money, he or she is obligated to pay it to them. The payment is focused on the recipient because the law requires that the offender return them their money. So category one, which is the actual payment, which we call the principal, it's all about making the victim whole. That's the purpose, that's the objective. You stole a, what's that painting?
Lawnmower.
No, it's the, no, it's the Edvard Munch, whatever his name is. It's the screaming faces, silent screams. Scream. There you go.
Is it called a scream?
I think there's a version of that was stolen. That's why I'm mentioning that. So the first objective, the mamain, not the knas, not the fine, the mamain, the objective of that is to make the victim whole again. Let's continue. By contrast, payment of a fine is focused on the giver. You're being punished. The offender is paying it because Torah law dictates that they should be punished by losing this amount of money. Although the point is the offender giving, we are still told that the money must be given to the victim because he or she is the other party to the case. So in a typical case where a person steals from someone, so that's the double payment, not our case where you swore falsely. In the typical payment, someone steals, busted by the law, has to pay twice, double the amount. Who do they give the double to? The extra, time? They give it to the victim as well. But it's not about making the victim whole. The victim was made whole with the principle. This extra fine is to punish the offender. It should hurt.
Punitive damage.
Punitive. Excellent. Punitive. It's to make it hurt. Let's continue. Incidentally, who do we give it to? Might as well give it to the victim. Anyway, you're transferring money. Just give. Okay, but it's mainly that second times of the amount is that it should hurt. It's 6B. It's to de-incentivize you from not coming forward. In other words, the fact that we're not going to fine you when you come forward is an incentive. The fact that we will fine you when you don't is also an incentive. Come forward. Make it right. Okay, 6B. So he continues, the same author. So that the fundamental difference between the categories of payment and fine accounts for their divergent respective bodies of law. For simple payments, the offender's confession does not absolve the obligation. There is no, this is fantastic. There's no reason to say that confession should create a pardon because for payments of restitution, the goal is delivering the money to the victim. If a person says, I'm so sorry for stealing your money, are we good? Of course we're not good. Your apology doesn't absolve you of returning the theft. Let's continue. The confession actually causes the obligation because we cannot obligate a person to pay without evidence. So as soon as the offender confesses, this is considered the strongest form of evidence, thus triggering the obligation to pay. So bottom line is, your confession, you're coming clean, doing the right thing, doesn't absolve you of making restitution. You got to make the restitution, but that's the first part of the restitution. The above is only true regarding payments of restitution. For fines, however, the focus is on punishing the offender for their offense by making them lose this sum of money. The Torah rules that this obligation can only be imposed based on witness testimony because this is a punishment given to a person on account of their sin, and the confession has the power to atone for the sin. So if you came first before witnesses and you said, I did a very bad thing, I stole this money, we say, you know what, we're going to take away from you the fine, because we're not going to take away the restitution. You got to make it. But the fine, the punishment, the slap on the wrist that we're going to give you, because you apologize so nicely, that we're going to take away. Good. Let's continue. Since the fine exists for the offender's sake rather than the victim's, when the offender confesses and absolves the punishment, they no longer need to pay the fine. The only reason a victim ever receives a fine is because the offender was required to pay. So by default, the money goes to the victim. But when we are absolving the offender of punishment, there is no longer any need to pay this fine. So in short, it's a lot of words, but I think it's fairly straightforward and fairly intuitive. In halacha, when we talk about monetary penalty, well, I'm using now a word that only means one of them, but monetary repayments, there's two categories. In Hebrew, one is called mamain, which literally means money. The other one is called knas, principal versus fine. And they have completely different, I'm going to use a Hebrew term here, or Gemara term, gedarim. They're completely different categories. They're different realities. It might look like, oh, it's all money. It's totally different worlds that are happening. One is the world of restitution. One is a world of restitution does not go away if you say, I'm sorry. You're sorry? Great, pay it. Make restitution. Doesn't go away when you say sorry. It kicks in when you say, I'm sorry. Because we didn't know until you confessed. That's what he just wrote. We had no witnesses. You came forward. Great, now you got to pay. But I said, I'm sorry. Exactly. Now pay. But what does sorry take away? When you say, I'm sorry, it takes away the penalty, the fine on top of that. You say, I'm sorry, right? Even to the IRS, you say, I'm sorry, they waive all the fees. I'm kidding, they don't, right? But in this case, halacha what? Say, if you stole something and then you say, there's no evidence, we can't find, I did it. Oh, you confessed, you're doing tshuva. We love that. We remove the fine, pay the principal, you're good to go.
What about the victim's lost opportunity cost?
That's today's class.
Yeah.
That's our case. Good. We take that away when a person comes clean. The opportunity cost is going to come into our case with the fifth.
So if you stole my goat,
Mm-hmm.
my goat didn't get to go and do hauling so that I could earn money.
Correct.
And I've lost that money. You don't have to pay me back
No,
for that?
No. What we say is, good question.
Why not?
A guy stole $100 10 years ago. $1,000. You know what I could do with that? Interest rates. Only if he comes clean. He only has to pay the principal. I think it's an incentive. It's a cheap loan. It's a cheap loan. It's a very cheap loan. It's like the joke that they say about the guy who says, can I take a loan of 50? I don't know, whatever. It's a whole elaborate joke, but I can't remember it and it's not worth it right now. We don't have time. What's the point? Correct. Even though it seems like the victim now is actually losing more, but we don't. We remove all penalties, including that penalty, in a case where he comes clean, perfectly clean.
So he could actually put his competitor out of business
by stealing
a critical component to the business. The guy goes into bankruptcy and then he says, oh, here, I'm giving it back to you now.
This law could be abused, correct. I think like most laws, you would have to figure out that Bezdin would have to figure out a way how to patch up that loophole. So, this is all the biblical law. Could the rabbis come if they saw abuse? The answer is absolutely. If they see anything, they can always patch that. And they do typically. The xeros, takanos, different things literally are being misakin, fixing loopholes that are found. So was that an issue that had to be mended at some point? It could be. I'm not fully familiar with this area of law. The point is that if you steal or whatever and you come clean, we remove all fines and just make restitution. If you don't and you get busted, well, then we're going to throw the book at you. Twice, you got everything. Our case is weird. It's a hybrid, as I said before. It's a hybrid because on the one hand, you did come clean. On the other hand, you only came clean after you stole, you lied, you swore falsely, you did all of these things. You double down. I'm going to say triple down because you stole. Then you said, I didn't do it. And you even took an oath to that effect. Now you come clean. Okay, one second. Now you come clean. After all that, after you dragged us all, you took us all for a ride. Okay, you came clean. Wow, you're such a tzaddik. You finally came clean. So righteous. Look at you with a halo around your head. You came clean, right? I lied. I swore falsely. I stole. I'm coming clean. You got a halo. Say, all right, hold on. That halo is not that's not your perfect halo. I mean, even in the regular case of theft, it's not as you said, right? It's not going to be a perfect halo, but this one is far from a perfect halo. Right? Like the amount of like misdeeds that were done that then built up into this like guilt, it makes a lot of sense why this guy can't sleep at night. Like he swore falsely over a Torah. I mean, come on. I mean, that's like using God's name. That's a heavy deal. No wonder he feels really guilty. So the fact that you came clean, we're not going to like pat you on the back. Sure, you're good to go. Just get back to 100. Now we're going to hit you with the 125. Problem is, and all this I mentioned before, I'm just reiterating. Who does that go to? Is it about making the guy whole? Well, I got the 100. Is it about? It's not the typical double that you have to pay when you get busted for stealing. Because you admit it. So maybe it's part of your tshuva. Maybe it's part of your atonement. Maybe the Torah says that the extra fifth is like the animal that you brought. It's like it should go to God as an atonement, as an offering, as I was guilty. My bad. I took your name in vain. I'm so sorry. Here's an extra fifth on top of the whole. Maybe that's the deal. Maybe that's where it's coming from. And so for this, the Torah says, no, last year hulo. It's got to go back the extra fifth also. You give it to the guy. You don't give it to God. You give God the animal, the sacrifice. Well, what do you give? What do you do with the extra fifth? You give it to the guy. Now the question is, well, why? We just made a compelling argument that maybe it's not the same as a typical case because here you did come clean. So maybe it's part of your spiritual, salvation, right? With the head on the forehead falling back. I'm kidding, right? But like maybe it's part of that whole spiritual tikkun. So it should go to God. Comes along the kliyakar.
What if he didn't admit it, but he was found out by witnesses or
No.
police or something?
That's
That's a
double.
whole
That's
other
double. No, that's double. It's not a fifth now. Now it's double. If you get caught stealing, that's it. Double. That's double. That's straight up.
This is very consistent though with how we deal with punitive damages.
It always goes to the victim.
Punitive damages goes to the victim.
Good. I think we learned that from here. In other words, secular gets this from this conversation in Torah. Because you could have thought, the Torah is telling us, don't think that it should go to God. It needs to go to the person. Why? Text 8. Look at the kliyakar, I'll read this. Adding its fifths to it. Why? For the money having been idle in the thief's hands. Look at text 8. You know what text 8 says? Opportunity. What did you call it?
Opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost. That's what he says. Literally, the kliyakar says this. The kliyakar says, why do you give the fifth to the victim? Because he lost his money. He didn't have his money for however long he didn't have the money for. So you're giving him. Now you're going to say, what, 25%? 25% thing? Yeah, 25%. Is this called interest? No. I mean, we asked the question before, right? Jay asked the question before. Isn't this interest? Isn't this biblically, approved usury? Like, what's going on over here? The way the kliyakar understands it, it's not interest as much as it is making the guy whole. In other words, you took 100, but that might have been 5 years ago. You can't give him back 100 and expect it all to be good. In a case of theft where he comes clean right away, not even right away, he comes clean without any, shenanigans. Okay, fine. Then we actually make the victim take that loss of the opportunity cost. But in a case where the guy swore falsely, now we're going to throw the book. Now we're going to give you that plus. Now, is there an algorithm that we say like 3%, whatever it's called?
Per annum.
Yeah, like no, there's 25%, fifth, which is 25% in this case. That's it on the top, however long it is, that's what we're doing. But let's go deeper. And now the next step to go a little bit deeper in this is going to be the final step to this conversation. The way we're going to go deeper is the following. We know based on Jewish spiritual and philosophical teachings that we believe that everything that happens comes from Hashem. To the point that in the book of Tanya, which we have in text number 9, an excerpt of, book of Tanya says, if somebody gets harmed by someone else, the thought should be, this has come to me from God, not the other person. In other words, if something happens to me, Hashem has put this in my path. Now, so how come that person isn't absolved from all guilt? Because he chose, or she chose, to be the agent. Who told you to be the agent? Give an example. Let's say one guy punches another guy for no reason, punches another guy in the face, breaks his nose. So in Tanya, he says, look, as hard as it is, try to reframe. Try to reframe. The fact that I have a broken nose, for whatever reason, that wasn't my destiny. Hashem wanted me to have a broken nose for whatever reason. Now, does that mean that the guy gets to walk without assault and battery? Does that mean that's it, he's good to go? No. Who told him that he has to be the one to cause the broken nose? Maybe it was going to happen because the guy would have tripped and fell. But it doesn't. Why did he choose to slug the other guy? You chose to slug the other guy? You're the slugger, a wise guy, Anyway, so you choose to do that. Now you're in trouble. Let's do text number 9 inside. We'll do this quickly inside, because this is a very powerful idea. The sages taught a person who gets angry is comparable to an idolater. The reason for this is clear to those who have deep insight. At the time of his or her anger, faith in God and in his individual providence has left them. For were they to believe that what happened to them was God's doing, they would not be angry at all. True, it is a person possessed of free will that is a free choice that is cursing them or striking them or causing damage to their property. The offender is therefore guilty according to the laws of humanity and the laws of heaven for the evil choice. Nevertheless, As regards the person harmed, this incident was already decreed in heaven, and God has many agents through whom he can act. Moreover, it's not only that a heavenly decree gave permission in principle and made it possible for them to suffer injury, even at the very moment in which the offender strikes or curses them, there is vested in the offender a force from God and the breath of his mouth that animates and sustains them. Let's leave off this last paragraph. The point is that we have a double understanding. For the victim, it had to happen. For the offender, it didn't have to be you. So now you're in trouble. So now let's break this down. Let's go a little bit further now. So now we have a question. Somebody steals money. Can they turn around and say, well, I guess your money was meant to be gone? Imagine someone steals money and says to the victim, I guess that's the divine plan. I guess that's the way it was meant to be. You can't say that. Why? Because maybe what's in the divine plan is for you to give back the money. You don't know. You can't use that as a do whatever you want card. If I do this, I guess it was meant to happen. I guess I was meant to steal this. I got it now. You can't do that. Because again, maybe the divine plan was for you to take it and then give it back. That's why you have to give it back. What about the extra fifth? Same applies. You can't say, well, I took the money. I guess you weren't supposed to profit from the extra. I guess you weren't meant to invest it and make money off of it because you didn't have it. I guess you weren't supposed to do it. No, maybe it was meant for the person to steal and then to get back with the extra fifth. Maybe that's the extra 25%. Maybe instead of investing in Bitcoin, all they needed to happen was for a guy to steal the money and to come back 25% higher. You can't play God. You with me on this? You can't say, if I have your stuff, you're not meant to have it. No, you're meant to give it back because maybe that's the divine plan. You can't say, if I have your money, then you have no opportunity to make a profit on it because I have it. No, maybe the divine plan is for you to return it with the extra 25%. Let's see this in the Rebbe's words. It's fairly straightforward, but it's also absolutely brilliant. This is text 10a. The fact that the money was taken away from the victim does not prove that they were destined to lose the money forever. It is possible that God decreed that they would lose the money only for a certain amount of time. We will only be able to determine if the decree was forever or only temporary from the events that unfold. If the thief returns the money, this will prove that the decree was only temporary. And if the thief doesn't return the money, we will then know that the decree was that the loss should be forever. Since we don't know exactly what the divine decree on the victim is, it is clear that the thief has no right to refuse to return the money or delay. The thief cannot claim that their failure to return the money will indicate that God had declared that the victim suffered permanent or long-term loss. This is the same as striking someone or causing them damage with the argument that this itself will prove that there was a divine decree that the person would suffer this damage. Yeah, I'm about to punch you in the nose, and when I do that, that was supposed to happen. You can't play God like that. Let's continue. Let's round this out. 10b. This also answers a question about the added fifth. By paying the fifth, it is possible for the victim not to lose anything as a result of the theft. Not only will they not lose the principal, they will not even lose the added profit that they could have earned if the money had remained in their possession. It is therefore possible that the divine decree that the victim would lose the potential profit was only until the time that the thief would return it, not forever, because when they return it, it's with the extra fifth, the extra 25%. Great, that's even better than inflation. Fantastic. I'll take that any day. What's the moral of the story? What we've explained is, number one, why the Torah says la'asher hulo, to whom the money belongs, but also what Rashi says, l'mi shehamamon shelo, to the one to whom the money belongs. What does that mean? It's not a reference to God. It's a reference to the one that had the opportunity to have done business with the money. The one that had a right to profit off that money now has a right to still profit off the money with the fifth that is returned, or that 25% that is returned to the victim. That's what it means. That's what Rashi's adding. Rashi's explaining why the fifth goes to that person. Why not to God? Why not give it as like a gift to the temple, to the Kohen, to the priest? Why not give it as a religious spiritual offering? Because you have to give it to the one who could have used the money. That's what Rashi's saying. The Torah says, give it to the one to whom it belongs. And Rashi is the one to whom the money belongs, meaning he could have used the money. You can say, oh, if it was taken, it must have meant that you weren't supposed to use the money. No, maybe it was meant for you to give me an extra 25% on top of it. And that's how we get the profit on it. Instead of investing in a business, The thief gave me back the 25%. I made a 25% return with this return. This takes us to the end of the conversation. And this closes out the insight into Rashi. But it opens up a window for human psychology in our lives. And the message is, I think, very powerful. The message is very simple. It's very easy for somebody to say, don't blame me. It's not my fault. Or, if it happened, it was supposed to happen. There's so many different ways in which people can excuse themselves and say, oh, it's not me. I had to do it. God made me do it, or God wanted me to do it. Whatever. In Judaism, there's only one response when we mess up, only one valid response, and that is to own it, right? To accept it, to confess, to fess up and say, it was me, I did it, I'm guilty, that's it. I want to just share a quick parallel, very quick. A tale of two kings. The first Jewish king was King Saul. When King Saul messes up, and the prophet says to him, why'd you mess up? Shmuel and Avi Samuel says, why'd you mess up? Right? King Saul says, me, I didn't mess up. I did everything right. So what do you mean? You messed up. You didn't get rid of Amalek. Maybe I did. You didn't. Well, the people told me not to. He kept on deflecting. When King David had his indiscretion, as it were, at least what seems like an indiscretion, and the prophet comes to King David and says, this is what you did. First thing he says is, Tatasi Lashem. I've sinned. He doesn't say, well, you know what? She was beautiful, and the husband anyway was guilty. He doesn't spin. No spin. The first words out of his mouth to Nas and Anavi, Natan Anavi, to Nas and the prophet is, Tatasi Lashem. I've sinned unto God. And this is the lesson for all of us. The lesson is, don't say, well, God made me do it. God wanted me to do it. It was meant to be. Own it. Say sorry. The title of the class today is Sorry, Not Sorry. Don't do the sorry, not sorry. I'm sorry, but not really. Just say sorry. It's healthy. That takes us to the end of today's class. Hope this made sense. A lot of insight, powerful life insight from Rashi and from the topic. A topic that I would venture to say at the end of this week's Torah portion, many of us gloss over as we're reading the Parshat. Need a little water. I'm all fucking. Okay, that concludes tonight's class. The moral of the story is stand up and own it. Next week, we have our special pre-Pesach class. So it's also going to be our Passover boot camp. So it's Tuesday night, first night of Pesach, Saturday night. This is going to be a few days before the holiday. Join us next week for an expanded edition, special edition of Torah Studies, Passover. Stay tuned for more details about that. We'll send out an email tomorrow about that class. I also want to draw your attention to a very special concert that is happening this coming Sunday, with my brother-in-law, Yuri Cohen. Sorry? Oh, good. Oh, very nice. Very exciting. So we have Yuri Cohen's Exodus 2025 edition, Ani Yehudi. Concert at 7:45. Concert plus wine tasting beforehand. It's going to be a fabulous evening of song and sound. Song and sound. Yeah. Song, music, inspiration, being uplifted in preparation for the holiday of Passover. Passover tunes, opera, Broadway, a show like no other, Sunday night, starting at 7 p.m. Join us. It'll be a lot of fun. Pleasure. Good. All right, good to see you all. Laila Tov, everyone. All good? Excellent. We'll see you guys. Take care.